Okay, good evening, everyone, and welcome to Tamayouz Talks. Today we have a special talk. Usually we don't go that technical in our talks. This one is about composition. We're going to discuss composition in your visualization for your projects. How do we do a composition for an image? We take you through the process, what things you need to keep in mind. Now, the person who's doing it, who's doing this session, that's his day job. He works for he did this for some of the best firms that we see their renderings in magazines and on websites. Before we start, I just want to remind you that for those who are interested in Tamayouz awards and competitions, our International Graduation Projects Award has 3 weeks left for you to register. If you're not sure how to register, you can go to our website, tamayouzaward.com. It's on register, straightforward process. You choose your award and you can register. There is also the university registration. If your university is interested in registering their students, they can use this. It pays for all the students to participate in the International Graduation Project and in D1 Award, not only for final year students, it's actually for all the students at the university. Now, that's the first thing. The second thing is we have just less than 2 months for our D1 Award for architecture. You can go to d1award.com and you see our brief there. It's a rehabilitation center for terrorism victims in Iraq. The first prize is either 6 months employment at D1 in Dubai, expandable to a year, or if it's more than one person in the team, it's a total, and you can't share the prize, you will get 6,000 as a prize. Now, last thing I would like to say is we have our, what we just launched this year is our World Top Architecture Graduation Projects. It's a good database and a good platform for you to look at projects that won Tamayouz in the past few years. They are chosen by our panel, so that makes the top 100. And you can check the projects, the designers. The images are better quality than the ones we put on social media because you can click on it, you can zoom. This option works best with phones. So give that a go if you'd like to see some of the projects that we receive, some of the good ones. We have filters on that. You can choose by result, you can choose by year, you can choose by country, and so on. So I don't want to talk much about this. I've been looking forward to this talk by Saman. So let me first introduce Saman. Saman, I met him first time in 2013. We had our award ceremony in Erbil, in Kurdistan, and we had a tour visiting universities. In Erbil, I met Saman at the talk at Koya University. In that session that I introduced the award was 1 year old, and sorry, 1 second, I have
just a reminder that it closes at 7.
Excellent. Okay, thank you very much. Thank you too. Never mind university security checking. So yes, met him in 2013, and in that session, he was the one who wanted to know most about Tamayouz and left an impression with me. A year after, he wins an honorable mention for the graduation project in Iraq. He then went to Budapest, Hungary, and he started studying an MSc in architecture at Page University. After that, he worked in, I'll leave these details for him, but he works at a studio called Brick Visuals. He's a senior 3D artist there. Some of their clients include Zaha Hadid, Perkins and Will, big architects, Foster and Partners. So I've been looking forward to this. And Saman, I don't want to take more of your time. I'll hand you the mic. You can share your screen, and it's all yours.
Cool, thank you. So first, let me share the screen, and then can you see it?
Yes.
Cool. So hi everyone. I'm pleased to have you here, and thanks for the Tamayouz family for giving this opportunity. Well, I was prepared to introduce myself first, but I think there's not much to say after this nice introduction and this nice story shared by Ahmed. But I will just give a quick introduction about myself. I am Saman. I'm an architect. I've been working as a 3D artist since 2017. After finishing my master's degree, I decided to follow this career path. During my years of work, I got a couple of awards. I'm featured by well-known magazines like Architizer, and at the studio where I work, Brick Visual, we are working with some prestigious architecture firms like Zaha's Ahmed mentioned, Zaha Hadid Architects, Foster and Partners. So here are some of my personal works. You can see it, and later when we finish the session, you can let me know which one is your favorite. So today we are going to talk about composition in architecture visualization. And I promise you, after this presentation, your image is going to look nice, and the way you are looking at movies and photographs, it's going to be different. So first, I would like to just give an overview about the agenda. What are we going to discuss today? At the beginning, I start giving a definition about the architecture visualization, and I'll introduce a couple of studios around the world, and then we go through the composition methods. What are the methods that it's important to use in our visualization or in creating our images? And lastly, I'll make an image breakdown for 2 images, and we'll go through how these images were made. So let's start by giving a definition to architecture visualization through the, just to remind you, during the presentation, we will use ArcViz. It means it's the shortcut for architecture visualization. So if we give a simple definition about the architecture visualization, it's a visual art. It communicates design and architecture. And if you think about it, it's just like cinema, video games, it's a part of digital art culture. Well, we said it's a art, but it's important to add this, let's call it, it's an applied art, because you have a client on one side and you have to fulfill this client's need by using your creativity. So it's an art, but it's an applied art. It's not like you are sitting, you drawing just for yourself, or you are creating a digital art for yourself. You have a client and you need to fulfill his needs. During the last years, the ArcViz has grown very rapidly because it's a great tool, I would say, to communicate complex designs. And it's a contemporary marketing material. Of course, when we say ArcViz, we are not talking about, a house rendering. We are talking about visualizing complex architecture ideas, designs, and concepts, because architecture is quite a complex product. So it's not only house. When you are rendering, you need to think about how you want, or you try to communicate this idea. Many of us, while we were students, or when we are designing, they are asking us, think about the context. Well, when it comes to artists, it's the same. When you are creating an image, it's not just about the architecture itself. You should think about the cultural surroundings. You should think about the material. You should think about the space program, how it works, and who are the users, actually. For example, if you are creating an image for Middle East countries, then the figures which you are using, it has to be the people from there. Or if you are making an image in a Asian continent, then the figures you are using, it has to reflect that culture, that continent. So that's why sometimes when you look at an image, you say, oh, but the architecture itself, it's a small part in the image. Why they are showing? Because that's when you need to think about the context and show all the context about this architecture. And at the end of the image, the architecture itself, it becomes just a small part of the image. So that's an overview about architecture visualization, but there are some amazing studios around the world which help the architects to bring these complex ideas and concepts to life by creating visualization for their design. So I would like to introduce a couple of studios and their works. First, I start with Mir, because if you make a search on Google, you will see these guys are #1 in the industry. They are working with the big names from Foster and Partners, again with Gensler, with big BIG architects. So you can see, for example, here, I just made a screen from their website. Of course, later you can check their works on their portfolio. They are really pushing the limits to the highest level to create a realistic images. You can see a project from Zaha Hadid, and all the others also are from the big and prestigious architecture studios. The second one, Brick Visual, it's the studio where I work here in Budapest. Again, we are, maybe I can talk a bit more about Brick Visual since I'm working there. So again, we are working with the big names in the architecture industry. You can name it from Kingo Kuma, from Gensler, Zaha Hadid Architects, so famous. Probably you have seen this C Tower from Zaha Hadid Architects. It went viral. The visuals were made by us, and just lately, although it's a controversial architecture project, The Line in Saudi Arabia. Again, the visuals were done by us. So we are working, as I mentioned, with these architecture studios. And then there's another artist studio called The Boundary. It's a UK-based visualization company. They are mostly working with the developers. You can see their works in New York, London. They are mostly helping the developers to visualize their works. They are also a really top-end studio. And then we have D-Box. It's I would say, one of the oldest studios in the industry. It was, if I'm not wrong, it established around 1996. Again, they are working with the big names in the architecture industry. You can see this Tulip project, which was designed by Foster and Partners in London. It was the whole marketing was done by D-Box, because now they are working as a marketing agency where you give your project and they prepare everything from A to Z for you. So these are some of the high-end studios in the industry. Now let's talk about dive into what are the components of a good image, how can you create a nice image for your project or for your design idea. So basically, when you look at any image, it can even be from a scene from a movie. It has three pillars: composition, story, and the color mood. When we say composition, what we mean? Composition, it's the visual language. It's the way how you show the hero. If it's a movie, it means your character. If it's a architecture visualization, obviously it's your architecture, how you show this architecture. So that's a simple definition. We go deep into that later. But secondly, the story. When it comes to architecture visualization, the story reflects the architecture program. Whether you have a museum or you have a tower, which is a residential tower, or you have a shopping mall, the story you are creating in your image, it should reflect this architecture program, because basically nowadays architectures actually the program makers as well, so they decide what's the program inside this building. And lastly, it's the color palette. Each image has a color palette, and this color palette, it shows the mood of the image. It's the same in movies. So the directors or the color graders, they try to give a certain feeling through a color palette in a movie. When you are working in creating a visualization, it's the same. You try to convince a message through color palette. So I would like to give a bit, make a highlight more about the composition, because it's our topic specifically for today. If we talk more about why composition it's important, because it's the way how you arrange your elements in an image in most aesthetically pleasing to eye. Sometimes you see an image, you say, oh, this image is not nice. So, and sometimes you see a rendering, you say, wow, that's so nice. But maybe you are not an expert in this field and you don't know why it's nice. I can tell you composition plays a big part in creating this outstanding image, because it helps the viewer, it attracts the viewer to the point of interest. So through the composition, you can create a point of interest in your image. And in general, if you use these components well and manage them well, you will be able to create nice image, because you will be able to give a message clearly. Because first, when you are designing, you have a message you want to tell, and through this visualization, you should transform this message to the audience. Again, I give an example about the movies. Let's think about the movies. Sometimes you are not always, when you are watching a movie, there is a feeling. It transfers through these things to you. So when you are creating an image, you need to be successful to transfer this emotion to the audience, just like a director or like a color grader in creating movies. So without be lost in the theoretical part, let's talk about the rules or the methods of composition. What kind of methods you can use while you are creating your image. Of course, they are not secrets. You can Google them, you can find them easily. But today we are trying to go through them and how it applies in architecture visualization. First, a rule of thirds. I assume some of you or most of you have heard about it, because even when you are opening your phone, there is a grid which divides the screen into 9 equal rectangles. How this method works? Well, you divide the image into 3 parts, horizontally and vertically, and you place your hero in 1/3 of the image. The whole idea about rule of third, it's how to create asymmetric visual arrangement for your frame or for your image. So let's see a real life example. Here is a shot. I took it from Game of Thrones. I assume we have some Game of Thrones fans here. So here you can see the main character. It was placed on the right side, 1/3 of the image, and he is looking at the city, which was also placed on 1/3 of the image. In that case, you have a balanced image, well-balanced image and asymmetric image, because we have your focus first goes to the hero, and then the hero draws your attention to the city, which is a clear message that the director wants you to see. Okay, that's from a movie. But then how can we apply in architecture visualization? Again, it's the same in this image. You can see our building on the right side. It's here. It was placed on the 1/3 of the image, and it was balanced with a story which is happening here. It shows the context, what's happening around this building. So that's why at the beginning I mentioned it's important to show the context as well, because when someone looks at this image, understand, okay, there's a building here, but then understands, okay, there are some cafes around this building. So it shows some stories, some activities happening around this building. Then we have golden ratio. Golden ratio is another way of creating a focal point or point of interest, where you try to put your hero or your architecture by the end of the spiral. And we all heard the golden ratio. It's a ratio, it comes from nature. We have it in architecture design as well. So as I mentioned, we put our hero by the end of the spiral, and we arrange the other elements around this spiral. Here you can see a visualization. As soon as I open this image, your eyes immediately goes to this part. That's not by accident, because the golden ratio was used. Of course, there are other rules were used in this particular image as well, like leading eyes here, this curve, and also the color contrast that you have a greenish atmosphere, and here contrasting with the orange. So your eyes immediately goes to this point, and then you start to exploring the image, what's happening there. And then now we have symmetry. I believe the name is familiar for whoever is working in design industry or in architecture industry, because it's one of the design principles. Here we put our hero, we put our architecture in the middle in a symmetric way. Here in this photograph, we can see it has a symmetry vertically and horizontally. So the building was placed in the middle, but at the same time, horizontally, we can see the reflection of it. So it's in both sides, vertically and horizontally. Usually when it comes to symmetry, we can see this method in church, mosques, governmental building photography, because it gives the power feeling. Here in artists, it's it was used in a very simple way. We have a modern building. It was placed in the middle of the frame. Well, you might now say, well, that's boring. I don't want to show my building in a symmetry way. I'm more creative. I can, the shapes where I am designing, it's different. It's not symmetry. So you can be creative just like here. So it's not necessary always to put the building in the middle of the frame. You can be creative and just find another angle, but you are still creating a symmetry image. So it all depends on your imagination. Now, one of the other methods is leading eyes. Here, as the name talks itself, we try to find additional elements in our image to create the point of interest. Here in this particular image, we have this villa, and then the road was used as a leading line. So what you do, you try through these additional elements, you draw the viewer's attention to your point of interest, which is the building or the villa here. In this artist, again, the artist, he or she used this path, which leads our eyes to the building here itself. So you try to find the path or a road or a landscape line to direct the viewer's eye to the point of interest. Now we have framing. Framing also is another great method to draw attention, to draw viewers' attention to the building or the message that we want to give here. And for that, of course, we can use trees. If it's, let's say, in a natural landscape, we can use urban or architecture elements to create this frame to show our building. Here in this photograph, you can see the photographer. He used these trees as a framing for the villa, which is here. So when I open this image, as soon as I open this image, your eyes start looking at the house. That's not by accident. That's by creating the framing for the architecture, and of course the color contrast, as you can see here. As I mentioned, you can use natural elements or you can use urban or architectural elements. In this visualization, you can see the stairs and the column were used to create a framing for the building, what we have it here. So this is our building, and then here is the framing for our building. Last but not the least, we're going to talk about rhombus shape or diagonals. Here we rarely see this method to be used, but if you have something specific, if you have a specific message you want to deliver it through this method, you can use it. And as you can see from this scene of again, it's a shot of from Game of Thrones. If you are into, I would I would need to make a recommendation. If you are into cinematic shots and you want to have a good sense of composition and lighting, I would highly recommend to watch the series, although it's old, but it has really good composition methods were used in it, where you can use it in your visualization. Here, as you can see, the elements were arranged in a diamond or a rhombus shape around the hero character. So when you look at this image, you immediately see this point of interest, the hero, which is in the middle. Again, here and in architecture, how it was used, for example, in the right image, it conveys that this museum, it has a aquarium over the ceiling. So the elements were used or arranged in a rhombus shape, and it has a hero which draw your eyes to the top, and then you start exploring this spiral ramp inside the museum. Or you can use half of the shape if you have a specific shape of the of a building. As you can see from the left image, it's half of the rhombus shape or the diamond shape, because the building itself, it has this triangular shape. And then triangle and special angles. Here, if you have a specific design, whether it's inside or outside, you can go through your design and find this specific angle. Usually, it creates triangles. Here, as you can see from these staircases, or here, how the special angle were used. We can talk about it even more here in these visualizations. First, on the right, is an image from Mir. You see the image were divided into two triangles, and then on the upper triangle, again, it was divided almost in two parts again, and the terrace is the point of interest. So when you look at this image, you immediately see this terrace and some activities are happening here. This is one of the special angle methods used in this image. And on the left side, again, you have these towers with roof gardens. You can see a lot of triangles were used. So they tried to achieve or to show the roof in triangle composition method. Or again, here in this visualization, the image, if you divide the image into two parts, and then you draw another line from this corner up until to the perpendicular to that line, and you place your architecture or your hero around here, and inside this triangle, you will put the story, what's happening inside this image, which shows the story of the image and the program of the image. Well, now you might say, okay, we understood all of these methods, but tell me, how can I use this in my project? How can I can create a nice image, an outstanding image? So no worries, I'm gonna give you some tips helping you to start applying all of these methods in your visualization while you are showing your project. First, let's start with the camera setup. It's really important to know how to set up a camera, because most of the time when you look at an image, you feel the image was not taken by a human being. What I mean by this, in normal life, when you take a photo, considering a human height average 170, 180, you can feel that this image is, well, it was taken around 170 centimeter high. But when you look at most of the visualizations, not successful ones, it's taken in 3 meters high, which is wrong. That's why when you take a ground shot, keep in mind, put your camera somewhere between 155 to 175. I would say 75, it's maximum. Never go beyond this. 170, it's the sweet spot. So try to have your camera height in that level, because in that case, you will be able to show your image, and the audience gonna feel comfortable. They feel that this image was taken by a human being. Because what's visualization? We are replicating real life photography. In real life architecture photography, you have the building, you go with your camera, you take a photo. But when it comes to visualization, you don't have the building yet. You are just creating this building in visual world. So when you set up the camera, you should replicate the real life camera setup. And then horizon line, always keep in mind, keep the horizon line under 1/3 of the image. What do I mean by this? Here you can see in these two visualizations, on the right side and left side, the camera, it's exactly on the human eye. And if we divide the images into 3 parts, we notice that the horizon line is in the first part of these 3 rectangles. So it's in the 1/3 of the image. That's why never go above this line. Try to divide your image and then put the horizon line in 1/3 of the image. In that case, your image will look natural. To finish all of these talks, I would give you some other techniques to have a perfect image. And let's start with the negative space, because it's really important. What's negative space? It's a space where you let the viewer or the audience to have a rest for their eyes. Because let's talk about this particular photo. Here, in half of the image, you are giving a lot of information to the audience or to the viewer. A staircase, stairs, some people are sitting, we have an architecture, some people are walking, boats, water. So it's a lot of information for human brain. What you can do to give a rest to the viewer, you give a negative space, which is blank. Nothing is happening there. It's just a space without having any information. So that's how you can balance your image with negative space. When you are giving a lot of information, keep in mind to have a clear sky or somehow a space which is blank. Nothing is really happening there, to let the audience, let their eyes to have some rest. And balancing also, it's really important how you balance your image. First, you try to use figures and other elements in your image. It can be a tree or a figure. These can enrich the image, but it's important to put in a studied way. You cannot put a character wherever you want. There should be a story why you put this character. And when you are putting there, keep in mind to have a story, or keep in mind to balance it out. Let's start with the right image, where you can see we have a character here. And on the left side, it was balanced with two other characters. So if we remove one of them, the image will look unbalanced. That's why this is one of the one of the techniques where when you put the character, keep in mind to balance it out. It's going to be more clear in the second image. First, we start, you can see it was balanced with the taxi. So here we have a taxi here. We have another one here. This is not by accident. If we remove one of the taxis, it's going to be off. When it comes to the group of people, we can see on the right side of the image, we have a group of people here, a character here. On the left side, again, we have a couple here and a character here. What does that mean? It means it's balanced in terms of using the elements. Since we are talking about the image and figures and additional elements, I would like to give a bit of highlight about scaling also. When you are using a figure, please make sure that you are using in a right way. How can you measure? When you are how can you measure that if it's a correct scale or not? For example, if you are putting the characters with Photoshop, just create a box inside your 3ds Max or SketchUp or whatever 3D software you are using it. Create a box with 170, just a average human height, or 180, and then make a screenshot from that scene and put it in Photoshop. When you are putting the character in Photoshop, try to match that height. In that case, it's not going to be a wrong scale because that's a human height. But if you don't have a reference point, then I assure you that it's going to be a wrong scale. Or when you have a pavement, just make a study that pavement or curbs are 15, 16 centimeter height. Try not to put more than this. It might look like it's small when you are working in the 3D software, but when you are rendering in a wrong scale, then at the end, the result will be wrong because you fake it in the 3D software at the first place. That's why don't worry while you are working in the 3D software. Just put the right measures, and then it's going to look correct scale. And why we said it's important to use these elements, because it shows the scale of the project. When you are putting a character, it shows you what's the height of this entrance. Maybe if we don't have the cars and the people here, we don't feel what's the scale of the building, or in the right image, actually, it's more visible. You look at the character and you try to assume that this seating area might be around 50, 60 centimeters. So that's why using additional elements, it's important in your visualization and image, but keep in mind, use it in a right scale. Otherwise, it kills your design. And last technique, the depth. Try to have a depth in your image. How? You might be asking how. I ask as well. Have a structure for the image, foreground, midground, and background, because we are trying to convey a 3D space with a 2D image. That's why for the viewer, it's important to see this depth in the image. You see, for example, in this visualization, we have a dark foreground. We see something happening in the foreground. This is the first layer of the image. And then we have the midground, which you always try to put your architecture or the point of interest in the midground. Here you can see the architecture, it's in midground, it's shiny. And then we have the background, which are the trees. It's back from the architecture, it's not dark. So when I open this image for you, you feel there's a depth in this image. That's why please try to structure your image from foreground to midground to background. Now, we went through all of these methods and techniques to create a nice image, to create an outstanding image. It's all important to remember these rules and techniques, but keep in mind, they are not official rules to be followed. At the end, rules are made to be broken. So don't be afraid to break those rules and techniques. Just follow your instincts when you are working, when you try to convey your design message. Just go around the building, find a nice angle, even if it's not following those rules we talked for more than half an hour, it's completely fine. If something is looking nice, it's nice. It doesn't have to be following some specific or official rules. As I mentioned, at the end of the day, rules are made to be broken. So don't be afraid, just broke the rules and create some nice images. I think we are somewhere 50 minutes in. If you are still have some energy, and if you are still with me, I would like to make a image breakdown for two images, how it was created, how these rules where we talked, I tried to explain, were applied in these images. So we're gonna start with this image. It's a lovely, nice image. It was created by Greek Visual. As soon as you see this image, your eyes are going through this middle part because first, a lot of people are there. It means some activity is happening. There is a contrast between outside and inside. As you can see, the outside is empty. There's only one character there, but the inside, a lot happening there. So immediately your eyes go to the happening, to the activity. But beside that, there are other methods used as well. For example, we talked about leading eyes. So we have these part which leads your eyes, which draws your attention to the middle of this building. And on the upper part, you can see negative space was used. So nothing is happening here. So we have a lot of information around here, but on this part of the building, which is around 15 to 20% of the image, it's just white. It's nothing is happening there. And then when it comes to balancing, we have a monument on the left side, but it was balanced on the right side as well. You might be asking, but here, this brownish, reddish color, it's more than this. But if you look at the brick here, it balances the same proportion of the color in the right side as well. And we have a sitting area here. We have a sitting area here as well. This is not by accident. It was studied. So if we remove one of them, let's say if we remove this side, the image goes to the left side. It's going to be unbalanced. That's why I mentioned balancing your image through additional elements. It's important. And then if we think about the color-wise, how this image was balanced when it comes to colors. On the right side, we see we have a facade with yellow brick. On the left side, we have a big tree with green color. But if you look at it, we have a tree somewhere around here sitting, and it's balancing the left side, because if we remove this green touch on the right side, it's going to be all yellow. It's the same on the left side. Here we have this green, but if you look at the foreground, or you can see the yellow for the leaves here. So even when it comes to the color, it's a very well balanced image. From this image, and we have another image from K2 Studio. As soon as I open this image, you as a viewer, your eyes goes immediately to this point of the image. Why? Because of a couple of reasons. First, that point of interest were placed in 1/3 of the image. It's rule of thirds. Secondly, we didn't mention too much about it today, about the color contrast. The color contrast also were used, where you can see outside, it's a very calm, cool, bluish color, but here you have a very warm color. So it makes your eyes to go there. Beside that, there's another point. You see this figure is here. It has a yellow hat. That's not by accident. That's a color balance or a tone balance, because here we have this warm yellowish color, and here we don't have much happening, but just a small yellow touch to balance a bit when you start looking at the left side of the image. Another thing which is used in this image, leading eyes in a different way. You see these curves on left side and right side, it leads our eyes towards the building here. Plus, it has a negative space, where we talked and we said it's important to have a negative space in your image, because you are giving a lot of information to the viewer, and please let their eyes to have a rest in the negative space. Well, that's it from my side. I don't want to talk more. I would like to give the mic to the people who are here, and shoot me with your questions, and let's have the discussion going on.
Thank you very much, Saman. That was a very interesting talk. I prepared a couple of questions. So, and then just before I ask the question, if anyone has any questions about what we talked about today, feel free to ask them in English, Arabic, or Kurdish. Saman actually reads Arabic.
Yes.
I don't think you speak it, but he understands it. Anyway, we can translate them. You can write them in the chat. I can read them to Saman, or you can message them to me in private, or just raise your hand and ask it yourself. Saman, for me, I have the main question is, you talked all about these methods of symmetry, golden ratio, the rules, sorry, golden ratio, rule of thirds, and then we talked about what was it, the balance and all of these things. Now,
Yes.
which one, how do you choose? How do you choose this image, this project will have this one, or do you use them all in different images for the same project? Like this project will have one in symmetry, one in golden ratio, one in thirds, and so on.
Have you finished with the question?
Yes, that's the one.
That was a great question. I'm happy you asked this because it's a smart question. Well, there is not a specific rule to choose which one you are going with it. But when it comes to creative process or analyzing the project, if you have a crazy design, you go with an unusual method. But if you have a, let's say, traditional design, then you go with a traditional one. Let's say you use symmetry. If you have, as I explained, if you have a like crazy design, you go with the special angles. You try to find the best angle of that project. So actually the design, most 80% of the time, the design itself pushes you which one you have to use. Because just imagine you have a very contemporary design, like, and then you're gonna use symmetry. That's not gonna work because you have really curvy lines, something happening in that design. Then definitely, if you go with a golden ratio or with a specific angle, it works better. But the safe side, the starting point always is rule of thirds. Rule of thirds, it's important. It's a safe side. If you have rule of thirds, you are halfway there. But I don't know if you got the answer of it or not, but I would say the design itself gives you a hint which one you choose.
Excellent. So let's say as a rule of thumb, you always suggest start with the rule of thirds.
Yes.
Yes, and then if I want to continue on this question and say, do you decide on the composition before you render, or you set up the render? Do you do it post-production, or you do it in render, the setup for the composition for the image?
That's also a good one. Maybe I had to talk about this during, but I'm happy that you asked it. You start at the beginning. The process starts when you have your modeled building. You just create a camera, you go through the building, you go around the building, you try to set up the composition before doing anything. So the workflow starts first. You get, if it's a client work, you get the model, you get the building, and you start exploring the building and the design. Where is the specific design, a specific detail you try to find with this composition method. So you say, okay, here is a nice design detail. I want to show this. And then you set up a camera with these composition methods to show this specific. And then you start detailing the model, and then you render. So it starts at the very beginning of the process.
Okay. I'm still waiting for questions. I haven't received anything. I actually have a couple more. I can ask them until we get more, and if not, uh, we'll do with that. Now, I would like to know about architectural visualization as a profession. You studied your master's in architecture. You're an architect. Most of the people here, if not all of them, are architects.
Mhm.
When you take that career shift, into architectural visualization, first question, is it worth it? Probably we're not very familiar with that shift here. It becomes as a side thing. You're an architect who does this. The second thing, which would be very interesting, because a couple of months ago, I had one of my, let's say, friends who asked me to put them in touch with a visualization firm for them to do a submission for a competition, not Tamayouz, of course. It was something for Saudi Arabia, and they sent me the prices. So I would like you to give a rough guide of the prices, just so people understand the value of architectural visualization and in terms of how much an animation costs. And in Europe, I don't want to put you in a position where you give us your prices, but an average in Europe of an animation per second and 3 renders or 4 renders. So it's just, I'm not trying to push anyone towards that direction. I'm just trying to give an idea of this side of architecture, that side of the market.
Well, I could talk about this topic for maybe 10 minutes. I try to make it abstract. I'm glad you asked, because I assume the answer would encourage some people to maybe to shift to this profession, because actually you can make a living with architecture visualization. Because again, at the beginning, I mentioned, when we talk about architecture visualization, we are definitely not talking about a house rendering. We are talking about communicating complex architecture ideas and designs. So for that matter, I would start with the architecture studios, because usually visualization, as you gave the story, it's mostly used in competitions, because if you don't have a good visualization, your chance to win this competition is a bit low. The one who has the best visualization, believe me, is the one who wins the competition. Sometimes even we discuss at the studio, sometimes it's not the design who wins, it's the visualization who wins, because it attracts you. It's a marketing material. Okay, you are not marketing for gaining money, but you are marketing your project to the jury. That's why having a strong visualization, it's so important. So for an architecture studio, if they win, let's say, a project, it's gonna be a couple of millions, right? So for them, it doesn't matter if they give a couple of thousands or hundreds of thousands sometimes to a visualization studio to prepare the visualizations. I can give you some numbers. Of course, in Europe, these are a bit, they try to keep it covered. They don't want to say it, but we are in the industry. We know, for example, the top ones, they are usually, they used to charge 5K per image.
$5,000 per 5,000 euros or dollars?
Euro per image.
Okay. $5,000
nowadays, I would say it's somewhere around 2,000 to 3,000, depends on the studio. So let's say.
And how many revisions with each image?
Sorry?
How many revisions? How many times they ask you to change?
That's a workflow, let's say. So I can explain our workflow in brick visual. We
Okay.
have a draft phase. So
Okay.
where we prepare a draft for the client. They can choose. So we send 3 options. I'm talking about 1 image. And of course, when we have a project, it can go up to 8, 10 images. So I'm just talking about 1 image. When you create this, you prepare the 3 options for this image. This is a draft phase. And you send to the client, and the client comments which one he or she wants. And after that, we start detailing this shot. We set up the lighting, the details around this image, and we send a preview version to the client. They make their comments. Of course, these comments are not about changing the model. So when we, at the beginning, in the draft phase, when we send, when they are okay, we are locking the camera angle. It means we are locking the composition. It's done. In the second phase, when you say okay to us, it means you are okay with the color mood, with the lighting, and this is also locked. And it comes to the final phase where we do the final renderings and we create the post-production and everything. But because I know when you are asking about this changing, it's, let's say in our area, it's mostly about the building, the architecture itself. But no, when we start, we already have a final design. Sometimes it happens, especially with the competitions. For example, it happens with Kengo Kuma. They were participating in an opera house. They were in the design process, but of course, there was not a drastic change in the building itself, even though we locked the cameras. But during the process of creating, they were sending us updated models. But of course, that's I would say it's a specific workflow for them for a competition. But other than that, yeah, actually, you can make, as I said, make a good money with visualization because you are making art. So you are trying to communicate the architect's idea and concept.
Excellent. Thank you for
Was
this
it a good answer? Do you think it encourages people to shift?
Okay, we have 3 questions. We still can take a couple more. First one, it's about urban projects. We didn't talk about urban projects, but if you're designing or working on an, this is a question from Joanna. If you're designing or working on an urban project, what angle should we take the render from? Should we take an aerial view of the whole project, or should we focus on important bits of the project? How would you take it? How would you approach an urban project?
Urban project, maybe we should have highlighted a bit more, but never mind. We can talk now since we have this good question. First, if you are designing the whole area, I would say yes, have a bird's eye view, but then go inside the urban design and take some specific areas about this urban design, because at the end of the day, people will experience what's in a human scale. That's why it's more important to show the human scale of this urban design. You can have a bird's eye view for it. I would say only one shot to show overall, but then I would definitely recommend to go inside the urban design and show specific areas where you think it has a value. Because at the end of the day, we want to show our design, and that's why it's important to show the design itself. So I don't think when you are designing, it's only visible from a bird eye view. I'm 100% sure you have some nice details in a human scale level. So have a bird eye view, but then I would recommend to have ground shots and show the interesting points of this urban design.
Okay, thank you. Joanna, if this is good enough, if you need to follow up on that, feel free to ask in the chat. Another question, Saman, thank you for that answer. Nurhan is asking, what's the rule when it comes to putting people in architectural shots? Sometimes if they are too close to the frame, can they take the attention from the architectural details or the aspects, even if they're visually pleasing?
Thanks for the question. Again, it goes back to the message you want to give. How? You can check some visualizations without having any characters at all inside, because that's the message what they want to show. You have other visualizations, maybe a hero character, it's right in the foreground. It takes maybe 15% of the frame. So I would say it depends on what you want to say through this visualization. If this character directing the viewer towards the building, it's completely fine to have a character in the foreground. It's not a problem. If not, if it distracts, you can just remove it and don't put any character in the foreground. But try to, when you are putting a character, I would say have a story. Don't put a character randomly. Try to create a story. That's why maybe it's important to watch some movies to get inspiration, because imagine from the traditional paintings where they had to give a whole story in one image. Okay, nowadays in our modern art culture, we have cinema, it's moving images, but think about the traditional paintings, famous paintings, where they were able to give a full story in one single image. So try to look at the, I would say, traditional paintings as well. Study how to put the characters in your image. Otherwise, it's going to be useless. I would give you, maybe I want to mention something. For example, if you look at some of Zaha Hadid's animations, they put white or black characters without any details. Of course, that's a part of the design philosophy. It means the design, it's more important than the users. So it was used intentionally. That wasn't by accident. So if we have, I mean, don't get it wrong when we say more important than the users, I'm telling this in terms of getting attention, because if we have a human being with all the details in the animation, maybe you start looking at the figures. But if you have just a simple abstract characters, then you start thinking about the design itself. So it might give you a hint when you ask this question as well, when you said which composition we should use. I am going to add this as well. Maybe when it comes to characters also, it comes to your philosophy. What do you want to say through your design?
Okay, thank you very much for that one. We have another question from Sarah. Thank you so much for sharing all this information about architecture visualization. Her question is, do those principles apply also for a poster, especially architecture where there are many information in one poster? Do you have any tips for poster design? Do you, in your work, do you get to design, if you're doing a competition, do you design the posters too? Or just the renders and the architects do the posters? And if you have tips on that, feel free to share them.
I would say that's really a different topic. It goes to graphic design. There are professions that are doing this professionally. They know how to prepare a poster, which typography use, which fonts to be used in this specific project. When it comes to us, unfortunately, we are not preparing any posters when it comes to architecture. But I can give my personal view on that. But of course, they can make a research on YouTube. I'm sure there are tons of information about this. They try to find this in graphic design industry. Or my personal view, try to be simple as much as you can, because sometimes I see posters, a lot of lines are coming, going without having any functions. Just like in architecture, you don't put something like, okay, randomly, I want to have a window here without having a function, but why? So try to apply the same principles when you are preparing your poster. Be as simple as you can. Don't put any lines which doesn't have a function, because it distracts the viewer from showing your project. Have a black or white, like a neutral background. Use a simple font. Arrange them in a nice way. I mean, Tamayouz did this, I would say, in a really good way, where you were providing a template. It was visible where you can put. I think if they are following this, it's going to be enough. As I said, please don't add any lines or any designs to the poster. Just be simple and show your architecture. Don't show graphic designs, because sometimes it can distract the viewer. I'm not sure if that's enough answer. I hope it helps. If not, we can talk about it more.
It does help, Saman. Thank you very much. I think after this question, I'm thinking maybe next time we do also a talk about posters. But for our competitions, we ask all participants to use our templates, as Saman asked, and this was from 10 years ago. The reason for that is the unnecessary things that take the attention of the judges. So for us, one of the main things is clarity and legibility. It has to be clear and it has to be legible. When I look at something, I can see it. Don't just fill the poster with things we can't see. Keep in mind, it's a normal eye that's going to look at it. We don't zoom if it's printed. That's one of the things. But some of the principles, Saman, you talked about are necessary, like balance in these posters and the negative space that is needed for a breathing space for all of this. It does apply, but I think this is a subject in its own. If it's for Tamayouz, the second two sheets are already designed for you. The first one, I would try and keep it as always keep it as simple as possible. In the end, you're not being judged for graphics. You're being judged for for the content. Saman mentioned this from his experience in working with many architectural firms for their competitions. But from our side, as a person who sat on all those panels that we do for Tamayouz, if it's a great visualization, it does help you. It does help you win, but it doesn't make you win if your content is not good. If one thing also, another thing that I would add to it, no competition would make a winner a project that is has a mistake in human scale, has a mistake in its scale. Even if the project is great and you have a problem in scale, nobody will take that decision to publish that project as a winner, because it means that whole award and the judging panel, they don't appreciate scale and whatever basic or fundamental rule in presentation. Now we have yes, this is recorded and it will be on our YouTube channel. Not sure when, but soon, before the deadline of our competition. We have three questions about software. I'm sure you were expecting that. First one is, what do you prefer to use? The second question, let's go with that one. Which one do you prefer to use for rendering and modeling? Personally, you don't have to tell us what your office does.
Well, we can talk about it. It's not a secret. I would
it's
say,
up to you. It's recorded.
3ds Max and V-Ray, it's a standard for the industry. I would say most of the studios, they have workflow using 3ds Max and V-Ray, but of course there are other studios. They are using, for example, Blender. Some of them using Corona as a render engine. So to be honest, it doesn't matter if you have the fundamentals. Doesn't matter if you are using SketchUp or 3ds Max. Of course, 3ds Max, it gives you the most realistic result with the V-Ray engine, but that doesn't mean, that's not necessarily to limit you not to use the others. If you have a nice light setup, if you have a good composition, then you have a nice image. So don't be afraid, and don't limit yourself for the softwares and for the computers, because you might say, but well, I don't have a good computer, I don't have 3ds Max, then I can't create a nice image. No, that's not true. That's just, you are limiting yourself. If you have the art, an artistic eye, how to create nice visuals, you can make it with SketchUp or whichever you prefer. But yeah, for us, we are using 3ds Max and V-Ray.
We have a question from Muhammad, who's asking a similar question, but is asking, what do you suggest we start learning? Suggest to start our learning and practice for 3D visualization, and which has a better scope for the future? You know, probably you know if any software is being not used anymore, or we prefer to switch to another one. Like, for example, I know in education in the UK here, education, we're trying to push the students to use SketchUp rather than the other software. I think that has a financial aspect to it, which is it's cheaper to get SketchUp for university license rather than pay the it costs thousands, but I think it has a financial aspect to that. It's all over the UK, not specific universities. But what would you suggest to start practicing for 3D visualization, and which software do you think has a better scope in the future?
That's a good question. If I try to highlight it, couple of points. First, visualization, it's two sides, the artistic side and the technical side. the artistic side, it's the fundamentals. When it comes to this side, I would highly recommend to look to architecture photography, look at movies, because it trains your eyes. It makes, because I'm sure after today's presentation, just go watch a movie. You will start seeing these rules. You will feel it. You will notice, okay, this is rule of third. This is framing, how they put the character there. And once you learn this, apply in your architecture visualization and architectural photography also. Look at the photographers, try to analyze how they are showing the buildings, because that's also an important part. There are a lot of people are architectural photographers. They are just taking photos for architecture designs. That's one side where I would recommend you to train your eyes and try to analyze and look at movies and photographs. The second side, the technical side, is also important, because if you have this side but without technical, and of course it's going to be hard to show your artistic views. So that's why the technical side is also important. I would say try whichever you are comfortable with it. Try to use a couple of them. Let's say use 3ds Max, use SketchUp, use Blender, and then see which one gives you, which one makes you that okay, I like this one. I go for this software, and I can make best images with this software. If you want to work with the studio, I would say start with the 3ds Max, because as I mentioned, most of the studios, they are using 3ds Max. And because as you mentioned, okay, for the universities, it has this financial aspects, but for the studios, they have the license, they can pay for the licenses. So I would recommend start with the 3ds Max, but don't limit yourself. It doesn't, let's say, maybe you say, okay, I want to learn 3 softwares, because then the more you know, the more you expand your limits. So maybe there is a studio that are only using SketchUp. You go there, you say, okay, I can adapt myself to that studio. There's another studio using Blender. You say, okay, I'm gonna use Blender. You can adapt yourself as well. So don't limit yourself, but of course you need a starting point, which I would recommend 3ds Max. Maybe I am also got used to it. That's why I'm recommending this. But as I mentioned, it's an industry standard. Everyone is using it.
Excellent. Last 2 questions, and we'll end after that. This question is from Reva. She's asking if you could mention software used for post-production other than Photoshop and Illustrator, other than.
Photoshop is number 1 for post-production. It's again, it's a part of the workflow, which most of the people are using it. Because it's it's easy, I would say. It gives a best result, and all the people got used to Photoshop. We have a couple of artists at the studio. They are using, for example, After Effects for post-production an image. We have 2 artists. They are using Fusion, because it's just easy for them. They would like to do it with Fusion. Fusion is a program for animation. You can color grade and edit your animations, but of course you can post-product an image as well. But Illustrator, it's not a post-production software. it's more towards the graphic design.
Okay, thank you very much. Last question, Saman. I left it last because I think it's a bit more detailed to what you're talking about. Can we go to the image of the rule of thirds, please? Yes, please. It's about how do we use the rule of thirds? Yeah.
Maybe I need to go back a bit, sorry.
Yes, this one.
This one or the one before?
Whichever. It's
Okay,
it's a question about rule of third.
Yeah.
Actually, no, it's the other one. With the rule of thirds,
Yes.
when you choose where to place your subject, the main focus of attention, do you choose the first one on the upper third, and then the other one on the lower, or how do you choose which line you go on out of those intersections? If we say the 4 intersections in the middle on the left, do they have to be diagonal to each other, or they can be at the same level, or so on? If you just explain how you place things with the rule of third, that would be great.
Yeah, I'm glad you asked this. Usually, you either place on the lines exactly, or you put on the intersecting these 4 intersections. It doesn't have to be diagonal. You try to put your main hero, the architecture itself, in one of these 4 intersections, and then you try to balance it on the other side with a smaller elements. So here, as you can see, I was about to point, but it's a screen, so it's better to show it with the mouse. The building, it's here. So the main point is here in this intersection. And then under this part, it shouldn't be exactly on the intersecting lines. It can be a bit lower, because even here you can see it's all the way up to the higher intersection. So was it a clear answer, or should I explain a bit more about this if it's not clear?
You can if you want. Do you go over the intersection? So let's say if it's the third line, the top line, and that intersection, yes, here.
Yeah.
Do you place at the center of that intersection the focus of the building, and then at the bottom to the left, you choose you put at the center of that the activity, or it's roughly around these areas, and or you can put them both at the same level, so the focus is the top of the tree and the top of the building. How do you play with that focus?
I will try to explain a bit more. It's usually in the center. It's not around it. Let's put it in that way. If we move our camera a bit towards the left, then the building goes off. Here also the aspect ratio plays a big part, because here we have a vertical aspect ratio, but let's say if we had the landscape one and we moved at the angle, it wouldn't be in the 1/3 of the image, or the point wouldn't be exactly in the center of the building. When it comes to the second part, it's not necessary to be exactly on the intersection. I think that's what you meant. Maybe I am wrong.
No, no,
it's not exactly on that one, but it's better to be roughly around this area, because imagine if this story is happening somewhere here, then this part would have been empty.
Okay.
or if it was somewhere there, here would have been empty. So you try to balance it on the other side, roughly around the intersection. Maybe if I go back to, no. Here, when it's not an intersection, it's clear. You put it in the, exactly in 1/3 of the image.
Yes.
Because here is in the middle of the city and here is in the middle of the character. But here is a bit tricky. It's both intersection parts and also the lines.
Okay. Thank you very much, Saman,
I
for
answered
your answer. Yes, I think that would be the answer our colleague was looking for. Thank you very much for your time. It has been a very interesting talk and very useful. Thank you for your time, everyone, for joining us today. We look forward to having you again. Probably we would love to hear the second and third aspects of image, Saman. We did composition, there is story, there is color palette. I think that would be also something to do in the near future. Thank you very much, everybody. Thank you, Saman, and have a lovely evening, everyone.
Cool. Thank you again. Have a lovely day.